Alright boys, we gotta talk, and today we're gonna be talking about a game called Deadlink. Now yes, it is another FPS Roguelite out there, and it is pretty good. We'll be talking about it today. Now the footage you're gonna see me running here right now is the Hunter gameplay. It's the class that I personally like the most as of recording this. It's also only the second of two classes I've tried. I've unlocked all four, but I've liked Hunter a lot, been sticking with it, trying to get the hang of things, because there is a long grind when it comes to upgrading, something I will be talking about later in this video. But right now, let's talk first impressions. I only have around like 10 hours in the game right now, but I'll break it down a bit more after I get them. I like it, it's fun, gameplay is solid, but could use a little bit more improvements in my eyes. Soundtrack isn't the best, but it gets the job done. We got some nice roguelike elements to make sure every run feels unique to a degree. Now let's dive into what all that really means. Gameplay first. Now it's important to keep in mind that I have only played 2 of the 4 classes present in the game. I've played Soldier, and I've played Hunter. I much prefer Hunter to Soldier because of the speed fantasy. Now, I know Soldier can be just as hectic and fast-paced, but Hunter is like that out the gate with the ability to teleport and the rapid-firing hand cannon. Now each class comes with their own primary weapon and secondary weapon, as well as 2 abilities. The primary weapon, in this case, the hand cannon, cannot be swapped out, but the secondary can be swapped out. The secondary weapon is called a heavy weapon and has limited ammo, whereas the primary has infinite ammo. You can refill ammo for your heavy weapon by destroying sea balls, little green glowing orbs around the map that are extremely important for high-level play in this game. Another extremely important mechanic you'll need to interact with frequently is the marking system. The grenade is the most common and straightforward way to apply mark. If an enemy is hit by a grenade, they are marked, and killing a marked enemy makes them drop shields for you. Killing marked enemies is the main way of getting shields, at least for the first 2 classes I've played. Luckily for me, the Hunter can also mark targets with both their abilities, which is another reason I was drawn to them at first. When you're finished clearing a room, you'll have a reward. Sometimes you'll have multiple rewards to choose from. In this instance on screen, we are going to be taking a neural boost, a flat stat upgrade to our character that we can choose. Not flashy, but they make a big difference. Speaking of clearing rooms though, let's segue into a series of segues. That slow-mo kill on the final kill in a room is pure dopamine, something that this game nails. I have my share of complaints about this game, but the visual feedback of getting a kill is great. There's dismemberment and decapitation present, and while it's mostly simple stuff, it's satisfying and gets the job done. But I'll tell you what isn't satisfying about the combat from a purely interactive point of view, and that is these enemies that you need to get behind in order to kill. They are so incredibly annoying to deal with, and I feel like they are just simply a time waster. They completely ruin the pacing of a fight. They are much like the Marauders in Doom Eternal, if you remember those. They simply have no place here. I don't want to play a game of Ring Around the Rosie until they either charge at you and into a wall, or my teleport skill is back up. They just feel like they're simply to waste my time, like I said, and I have no fun fighting them. Luckily, they are only really oppressive in the first and third stages, but still, my eyes roll whenever I see one. Now, what you just saw there was the Implant System, which is actually incredibly interesting to me from a roguelite perspective, and something I haven't really seen before, or at least not to this degree. So, implants are the bones of your builds. Most implants have an active ability and a passive, while others are just passive, but provide meteor buffs. Each implant with an active buff has an energy cost associated with it, and there are 4 methods of activation, all with varying pools associated with them. The 1 cost activator is tied to swapping your weapons, the 2 costs are tied to both your abilities, and the 3 costs are tied to breaking sea balls. Passive effects from these implants will be active regardless of where you slot the implant, even if you have it slotted into an activator that can't give you energy for the active. I will sometimes take an implant and slot it into my swap weapon slots, even though there isn't enough energy, because I care more about the passive effects than I do the active effects. Now, implants can get really crazy and drastically change the way you play, especially when you're stacking their effects with one another. My favorite build so far was a sea ball focus build where I would use my teleport to break sea balls instead of switch positions with people. It was really fun and unique compared to all my other runs, and since 3 cost implants usually have really strong effects, I was decimating everything whenever I teleported from one ball to the next. I think the freedom the game gives you with where you want to place implants and how you want to activate them is really healthy for the game, and probably its staple feature in my opinion. Yes, it all boils down to RNG in the end, depending on what you get, but having enough control to decide how you use the spoils of said RNG gives players the chance to bend the build to their playstyle, instead of having their playstyle completely change and adapt to the build based on the random upgrades you get. There's always going to be a little give and take there, but this is very interesting, and I'm a big fan. Now, on top of implants, you can also upgrade both your primary and heavy weapon, while also having the ability to completely swap your heavy out for something else. Heavy weapons are simple. They give stat boost when upgraded to the next level. These stats are different for each weapon and are tailor-made to amplify the behaviors of each heavy weapon specifically. Sometimes, you can swap out for a higher rarity one that has special effects on top of increased stats. The rocket launcher negating all self-damage is an example of this. Main weapon upgrades are a little more complex though. Main weapons have upgrades that can apply elements and change behaviors. These can help, but it's also important to note that these can hurt you a lot. I, for one, never recommend taking the precision upgrade for the Hunter's hand cannon, because it kills your rate of fire. The penalty heavily outweighs the bonus. Now, this is one of my complaints, because this is clearly a balancing issue, and we'll get more into that when we talk about elemental properties too, which are also upgrades you can get for your main weapon. But while we're on the topic of build crafting and showing off implants and what upgrades for your weapons can do, let me talk about their secondary game mode, which is an endless type mode where your builds can get insane. I focused entirely on my Hunter's hand cannon in this run, and it was shredding through everything, and honestly, it was kind of breaking the game. It was all a ton of fun, and I usually don't go for endless modes, but this actually was probably the highlight of the game so far for me. It was just a ton of fun seeing how crazy these builds could get. Okay.
Oh my god. Are you joking? Dude, endless, at this point it's gonna be.
Just checking up on you. Wow, I'm amazed the wetware hasn't burnt out yet.
That was ridiculous.
That was a little ridiculous.
Next week.
Yeah, that was a boss, by the way. Now, I'm a little sad with this next clip because I did take the precision upgrade for the hand cannon, and this is when I learned that you should never, ever take it. Now, I took it a little bit ago. I took it here. You're going to see why it's so bad. My fire rate is pitiful, and it just kills the entire gun. Never take it. Word of warning. Now, I'm at wave 70 right now, and it seems like a final boss wave comes in to clean house because these guys were not playing around. They did not want me getting past 70, and I'm curious to know what would have happened if I beat them. It seemed like this might have been one last Hail Mary from them to beat me, and it worked. Bro, they have him cracked out. Look at the fucking speed at which he's attacking. I'm moving. Is 70 just like the end? Are you just dead at 70? That was like cheat code shit. Oh my goodness. Did you see that? Alright, that's all the things I like and think are working for the game, but let's get into a few things that I'm on the fence about and straight up don't like. Let's talk about elements. So these are interesting, but they are bold. They make up a healthy amount of your main weapon upgrades, and they have damage boosts and reductions, which I'm not a fan of because they are really restrictive. Electric does more to robots, less to humans. Fire does more to humans, less to robots. Toxic does more damage to armor and seemingly has no downsides. Now, these all have secondary effects, which I am a fan of, but having them do more or less damage to certain enemies is a no-no in my book. Now, you're seeing the boss fight for stage 2 here. He has an armor bar, but I currently have my weapon built with electricity damage because the stage 1 boss is a robot, and I haven't put toxic or fire on my weapon yet. They just simply haven't come up. I do not feel like I'm doing much damage here. Even after I get his armor down, I feel like I'm not doing too much damage. This is problematic because now we're playing a roguelite where our build choices are actively hurting us if we don't get lucky, or very lucky even. Now, you could argue and say that this is my fault for not choosing electricity in those early stages, knowing that the stage 2 boss would be human. But I would say that I was borderline forced to choose electricity in stage 1 in order to kill the stage 1 boss in a reasonable amount of time so that it didn't end up like this fight currently. I was just hoping I could get another weapon upgrade on the way to this guy, but I did not get one that offered fire damage, so here we are. These elements all have secondary damage options, which I'm totally fine with. but they would have been much better off in my opinion if instead of dealing more and less direct damage, depending on the enemy, they would just apply debuffs on top of the secondary damage with varying effectiveness based on the type of enemy. This way, we can focus on build variety instead of being shoehorned into choosing the most viable element for that stage. I'll have you know that I do 60% increased damage whenever I break a C-ball here because of my implants, and this is still the type of damage I'm pulling. It doesn't matter how strong your build synergy is if you aren't playing the element game optimally at all times. And in a game where that boils down purely to RNG on whether or not you even get main weapon upgrades on the way up to a boss, that's not a good thing. And even if you do get the weapon upgrade as a choice on the way up to a boss, you are forced to take it in hopes that you can get the right element, which heavily limits your build variety and hurts player choice and uniqueness. Honestly, with the way it's set up right now, unless the stars align, you're probably better off just skipping elements altogether and missing out on the possible fun you will have with them just so you don't have a chance of getting shafted like this. Now, all of this I just showed you was on the second difficulty. There are currently 3, and this leads to another issue, is the difficulty scaling. From 1 to 2, it feels natural. 2 is much harder than 1, but it feels natural, like a natural progression in difficulty. Now, let's talk about the third difficulty. It is not good.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm going to be able to beat this guy. Do you see how little damage I'm doing right now?
This is the highest difficulty. The third of 3 difficulty options, mind you. A direct increase from the difficulty I've been playing up until this point in the video. This is also the stage 1 boss. Granted, I am using the fire element on a robot, which is no bueno, but 90% of stage 1 is fighting humans up until this point, and they were just eating my shots, even with fire damage on my gun. So it felt necessary to take fire damage just to get to the boss in the first place. Keep in mind though, my secondary, my heavy weapon, and my grenades are not fire damage, and they are still just barely tickling this boss.
Like, that's how quick it is to kill something 1 difficulty below the hardest. And then if you switch to the hardest difficulty, like, that's just crazy to me. The scaling is terrible.
Now, while it does make the fight harder, it is way more annoying. The increase in time required to beat these bosses over exceeds the additional challenge the fights provide. And because of the extreme ratio differences between increase in time spent versus increase in challenge provided, it just feels like an extreme case of artificial difficulty, which to me is both lazy and unrewarding. I highly advise avoiding the highest difficulty unless you just want to punish yourself or until it gets rebalanced. It is ridiculous. Now, that got a little rough there. I do want to point out that I really like this game though. I prefer to do things on the hardest difficulty, and if you give me an option to do it, I'm going to try to do it, and this difficulty option in this game really killed my fun with the game, and I just kind of have to kind of break that rule I usually follow, and I'm just going to keep playing on the second difficulty, because that is where the fun is to be had. Now, I only have the 3rd row of base upgrades completed, and people tell me that the final difficulty gets slightly easier when you unlock all the base upgrades. These are all passive upgrades that can do things like give you more damage reduction, recharge shields between stages, give you more credits to spend at shops, give individual classes more effects, etc. They make a difference. So maybe if and when I unlock all of those, I'll give the hardest difficulty another shot. But that brings me to another point. It takes forever to get all those upgrades. I actually had multiple people come into my chat while I was streaming this game tell me that a lot of players will mod save files with all the upgrades already completed into their games because the grind to unlock everything is just way too long. Now, I won't do anything like that because I'm just too lazy to mod it in, and I have a delusional sense of accomplishment when I earn them all legitimately, but it really is just an absurdly long grind. It feels like this game has a bunch of time wasters built into it because of the lack of content, which is a real shame because I feel like the devs have an incredible game on their hands already, and these time wasters are really lowering the quality of it in my eyes. Now, I mentioned a lack of content there, and I feel that's true. There's only 4 stages, only 4 bosses, only 4 classes, only 2 game modes. Keep in mind, these classes also only have one main weapon. It's not like you're spoiled for choice with weapons here, and you only have a handful of heavy weapons to choose from. Implants are the craziest this game gets, and while they do get crazy, that's still not as crazy as other games in the space. Like, this game is lacking content, especially when compared to other FPS roguelites in the space. I was honestly surprised that this wasn't an early access title, and after I did a little questioning in the game's Discord, I was even more surprised to hear that the game was finished for the most part. That's a real shame because even though it has a small amount of content, the content is golden. Deadlink is an incredibly fun game that could really benefit from some more content. Well, that pretty much wraps up everything I feel about this game. Now, it's reasonably priced at $25 USD on Steam, and if you're a fan of FPS roguelites, this is definitely worth a buy. I'm going to keep playing it and checking out more classes. It may be a small game, but it really is a fun one. Fingers crossed it gets more updates in the future. But yeah, thanks for making it to the end of the video. If you enjoyed the video, please consider leaving a like, a comment, and subscribing as it helps out the channel tremendously and lets me keep doing what I'm doing. Let me know if you want to see more Deadlink along with my other content. We can do analyzed runs, much like we do with RoboQuest, in this game too, if that sounds interesting. So keep me posted in the comments below. Also, if you want to hang out live, you can check out my Twitch in the description below. I hope you all have a great day. I'm Hatterax, signing off. Peace.